It may seem difficult to imagine a world without plants, and yet this was what Earth looked like 500 million years ago. Lifeless, with not a hint of greenery in sight. And yet look at the world around us today, full of diverse flora, from tiny carpeting mosses to towering trees. What adaptations led plants to conquer the land and become so successful? And what ways can we classify the diversity of plants we can find?
I'm Taylor Pillay.
And I'm Matthew Bennett. And in this movie,
We're going to take you on a tour of the wonderful diversity of plants. To begin with, the variation in the types of plants around us is due to a number of environmental factors, biotic and abiotic. Abiotic factors are non-living factors in an environment that directly affect the type and amount of living organisms within that environment. The presence or absence of light influences both where and how plants grow. Shaded landscapes will have a different vegetation type to more exposed landscapes. Wind affects plants in opposite ways. Plants need to be able to withstand wind, especially those in more exposed landscapes or those with strong winds. The type of soil which plants grow on is also a large factor in vegetation type. For example, feignboss prefers more acidic soils. The direction where a slope is facing and the amount of incline it has affects the vegetation type an area will have. Water is one of the most crucial factors in determining where any living creature is found. Plants in wet, damp, or humid areas differ strongly from those in drier places. But if you look closely at the different plants, it becomes apparent that each can be classified into one of 4 evolutionary grades, which tells us the story of the land plants.
The most primitive of the land plants are the bryophytes, which are more commonly known as mosses, liverworts, and hornworts. They are found in consistently wet, shady areas, as they are heavily dependent on water. Much like their algae ancestors, the only difference is that they are now terrestrial, which means they grow on land. Unlike most other land plants, the bryophytes do not have vascular tissue, such as xylem and phloem, to transport water efficiently, or a waxy cuticle to prevent desiccation. They need to be kept damp, otherwise the entire source of water will be lost. For bryophytes, a male sperm needs to swim on the surface of the gametophyte that produces it to the egg. So the presence of water is necessary for fertilization, so that the sperm can swim to the egg. The fertilized cell then grows into a diploid sporophyte, which undergoes meiosis to produce spores. These are then dispersed into the wind. The haploid spores then grow into a haploid gametophyte on a different plant. Unlike other plants, mosses and bryophytes in general have a dominant gametophyte generation, as they depend on the gametophyte in order to reproduce. The bryophytes were the first plants to exit the water, but in all honesty, they are very poorly adapted for the land. The next group of plants which evolved were pteridophytes. As plants moved away from the water, they needed a more efficient water retainment system, resulting in the evolution of vascular tissue, much stronger than xylem and phloem, a waxy cuticle, as well as the sporophyte becoming the dominant generation. This allowed them to grow taller as water could finally move from the bottom of the plant through the true roots, woody stems, and into the leaves. But these new vascular plants in the reproductive cycle were similar to bryophytes, as they were also still dependent on water for fertilization. Their spores, which were dispersed through the wind, had to grow into a gametophyte, now a minuscule structure called a prothallus. On this, the sperm had to swim through the water to the egg. Despite this restriction, for a time, these spore plants dominated the world, until the climate began to dry out. They still persist though, in the form of club mosses, horsetails, and most visibly, ferns. On the underside of ferns, you can see the clusters of sporangia, called sori, which release their spores, differentiating them from the most common type of remaining plant, because in the dying Pangean climate, it was not enough for plants to just have vascular tissue. They evolved to cut their reproductive ties to water entirely. Now they became spermatophytes, seed-bearing plants. The seed plants can be divided into 2 notable groups. The older is the gymnosperms, derived from the Greek word for naked seed. The seeds are not enclosed in an ovary. Gymnosperms are not the biggest group of spermatophytes, but they can be found in many environments, from the pines of freezing Alaska to the world's witchia of the baking gnomib, and many other types. These gymnosperms do not need water for fertilization. Instead, their male parts produce pollen containing the male gametes, which is blown in the wind to a female part of another gymnosperm, and fertilization occurs there once the male gametes reach their female counterparts. Male cones are normally smaller and thinner than their rounded female counterparts. The female plants then produce seeds, which are normally unprotected. These naked seeds give the gymnosperms their Greek name. Gymnosperms are widely diverse, but
Despite this, 9 times out of 10, a plant would be of the angiosperm group, the flowering plants. This is the most diverse clade, with over 300,000 species. Angiosperms can be found in incredibly varied environments, even in the ocean. Angiosperms are spermatophytes though, so they do not need water for fertilization. Instead, fertilization occurs again by means of pollination. But to increase the chances of pollination, these plants have developed the complex reproductive organ called a flower. Flowers have a sepal, petals, and male and female components. The male part is called the androecium, consisting of many stamens, which are pollen-producing anthers supported by filaments. The female part, meanwhile, is the gynoecium. The carpel contains 3 parts: a stigma, a style, and an ovary containing ovules. The pollen produced from an anther contains male gametes. Pollen attaches to the stigma at the top of the carpel, grows down the style, and sends sperm through it to the ovary, where the ovules and female gametes are located to achieve fertilization. And it is this ovary that sets the angiosperms apart from the naked gymnosperms, as the ovary will protect the seed as it develops. Some angiosperms, such as grasses or restios, are wind-pollinated, and so their male flowers are long and thin, with many stamens to dangle lots of pollen out into the air in the hopes that at least some will reach another plant. Such flowers are also very dull and small, as they do not need to be attractive. But for many angiosperms, the main point of a flower is, normally, to attract attention from potential pollinators. These can range from arthropods to birds. Insect-pollinated flowers are small, scented, and colorful, and offer sweet nectar which insects can't resist. They will pick up pollen from the anthers while feeding on the flower, and then the pollen will be deposited on the carpel of the next flower of that species that they visit, ensuring that pollination takes place. Bird-pollinated flowers are much the same, colorful with nectar, but are larger with thicker petals and branches used as perches, and longer, tubular flowers made for longbird beaks. But getting the pollen out is only half the problem. Plants also try to avoid self-pollination or fertilizing their own gynoecium, because pollinating another plant allows for more genetic diversity, ensuring that the offspring produced will be adaptable. Plants can cause cross-pollination in numerous ways. One is to have a plant individual that is completely male or female, so that self-pollination is literally impossible. Spermatophytes, which divide themselves into sexes this way, are called dioecious plants. This is effective, but has the drawback that if no female plants are in an area, then reproduction is impossible. Other plants stagger flower growth, so that on an individual, either the androecium or gynoecium develops earlier. This means that a plant can either only produce or receive pollen at a certain time, making sure fertilization can only occur between 2 different plants. If the male androecium develops first, the plant is protandrous. If the female gynoecium develops first, it is a protogynous species of plant. Once pollinated, angiosperms have a large variety of ways to ensure that seeds are dispersed to not compete with their parent plants. Seeds can be dispersed directly into the environment or placed into tempting fruits, which animals eat and ingest some distance away. And sometimes, seeds are timed to germinate after particular environmental conditions, such as fire in the case of fynbos, so that the seeds can inherit the land from their forefathers.
And in just the same way, the angiosperms became one of the most diverse groups of eukaryotes, inheriting the land from the previous plant groups, each of which contributed a few successful adaptations. As bryophytes, they managed to leave the aquatic environment behind. As pteridophytes, they evolved ways to reach towards the sky with vascular tissue. And the innovation of seeds allows the spermatophytes to sever reproductive ties to water and diversify hugely. With the angiosperms' complex methods of pollination and fertilization, it allowed them to become highly numerous. Plants are all around us. We depend on them, and we cannot even begin to imagine a world without them. Their sheer presence everywhere is a testament to the 500 million year old story of adaptation and diversification, creating the green planet we know today.